Captain Emily Sanders stepped out of the transport truck and onto the sprawling military range, the sun just beginning to climb over the horizon. The air was crisp, carrying the faint smell of gunpowder from previous drills. Her boots crunched against the gravel, and for a moment, she paused to take it all in. She had been to many shooting ranges before, but this one was different. It was one of the U.S. Marines' long-distance sniper ranges, and she was about to compete with some of the best marksmen in the Corps. She could feel the weight of the pink rifle in her hands, its polished finish gleaming under the morning light. It was not the standard matte black weapon the other Marines carried, but Emily had chosen it carefully. For her, the color wasn't just a statement. It was a reminder of who she was. Every scratch, every polish, every careful adjustment she had made to the rifle spoke of countless hours of preparation and practice. Yet, she knew she would have to prove that skill mattered more than appearances. As she moved toward her station, a group of Marines nearby noticed her. They were experienced, tall, and confident, each carrying rifles that looked exactly the way military weapons were supposed to look. Tough, utilitarian, and intimidating. When their eyes fell on Emily's pink rifle, a few snickers escaped, followed by quiet whispers. "Is that a toy?" One of them muttered under his breath. Another shook his head, pretending to be shocked. "Who brings a pink rifle to a sniper range?" Emily didn't react. She had learned early in her career that attention, whether positive or negative, was a distraction. Her focus was on the target, on the shot, on everything she had trained for. She found her station at the far edge of the range, set her bag down, and began the familiar routine, checking her ammunition, adjusting her scope, and slowly assembling her rifle. Every movement was precise, calm, and methodical. She didn't need words to explain herself. The rifle and her skill would speak for themselves. The other Marines continued to glance her way, some trying to hide their curiosity behind fake laughter. Emily noticed nothing. Her eyes scanned the distant mountains, measuring distances and imagining the trajectory of each bullet. She had trained for this moment for years, running through calculations in her head over and over. Every tiny adjustment mattered. The angle of her scope, the pressure on the trigger, the way the wind shifted across the range. She had done all the preparation, and now it was time to perform. Around her, the range was alive with activity. Instructors shouted commands, bullets cracked through the air, and targets in the distance twitched from the impacts. Emily found a quiet corner in her mind amidst the chaos, a space where the noise didn't exist, where only precision, timing, and focus mattered. She adjusted her seat, rested the rifle on the stand, and took a deep breath. The pink rifle, a point of mockery to some, felt like an extension of her own arm, steady, reliable, and ready. The Marines who had laughed continued to murmur among themselves. "Maybe it's all just style, no skill," one of them said, shaking his head with disbelief. Another leaned over, pointing subtly. "She probably won't even hit the first target." Emily heard none of it. The sounds of the range, the laughter, the whispers, faded into the background. What mattered now was focus, patience, and the moment that was about to come. She thought about the journey that had led her here. Years of waking up before dawn, training her body and mind, studying ballistics, understanding wind patterns, and practicing long-distance shots in rain, sun, and snow. She remembered the nights spent alone on quiet ranges, perfecting her breathing technique, learning how to hold still for minutes without movement, and how to make each shot count. Every ridicule, every doubt thrown her way had only strengthened her resolve. As Emily tightened the final screws on her rifle and adjusted the scope one last time, she allowed herself a tiny smile. It wasn't about proving the other Marines wrong. It was about proving to herself that all the hours of preparation, all the discipline, and all the dedication would pay off. The pink rifle, bright and unusual, was not a gimmick. It was a symbol of her determination, of her confidence in her skills, and of the fact that sometimes appearances were misleading. The sun climbed higher, warming the range and casting long shadows across the targets. Emily's moment had arrived. She rested her cheek against the stock, took a deep, steadying breath, and allowed herself to visualize the shot in her mind. Every calculation, every movement, Every practice session led to this. And though the other Marines might still be laughing, still whispering, they would soon learn that skill, focus, and determination were far more powerful than color or appearances. Emily had barely settled at her station when the whispers and laughter around her began to grow louder. The other Marines were circling in small groups, their eyes flicking toward her pink rifle with a mixture of disbelief and amusement. Some of them openly smirked, nudging one another and making jokes that were meant to undermine her confidence. "Do you think it comes with sparkles too?" One Marine whispered loudly enough for half the range to hear. "Maybe it shoots glitter bullets," another snorted. Despite the teasing, Emily remained completely calm. She had faced mockery before, but the laughter never distracted her. It only reminded her why she had trained so hard. She knew that skill spoke louder than words, and that one perfect shot could silence even the harshest critics. As she methodically began to prepare her rifle, the Marine's comments grew more audacious, almost as if they were testing how much she could tolerate. "Nice color," a Marine said sarcastically. "Do you match your uniform too? Or is it just the gun?" Emily didn't respond. She adjusted her scope with slow, deliberate movements, her fingers steady and precise. Every adjustment was a small act of focus, a way to block out the chatter around her. The barrel gleamed in the sunlight, pink yet sharp, reflecting her determination. Some of the Marines rolled their eyes, muttering that no matter how polished the weapon looked, it would never compete with their standard rifles. A few instructors walked by, observing the scene with quiet interest. They had seen countless recruits with flashy or unusual equipment, and most failed because they relied on style rather than skill. But something about Emily's posture, her focus, and the care she took with her rifle caught their attention. One of the senior instructors exchanged a glance with another, a small nod passing between them, silently acknowledging that this young marksman might be more than just a colorful anomaly. Emily's mind was already on the task ahead. She was not concerned with the opinions of others. She was thinking about wind patterns, bullet trajectory, and target distance. She ran through the mental checklist she had rehearsed countless times. Scope alignment, breathing rhythm, trigger pressure, and environmental factors. Each step was ingrained in her muscle memory. The pink rifle, in her hands, became an extension of her body, a tool of precision rather than decoration. Around her, the Marines' laughter continued, though some began to quiet down as they noticed her unwavering focus. "I bet she won't even hit the target at half the distance," one muttered. Another whispered, "Let's see if her glitter gun even shoots straight." Emily, unfazed, continued with her preparations. She cleaned the barrel with meticulous care, checked the ammunition, and calibrated her scope down to the last millimeter. Every movement was measured, controlled, and deliberate. The taunting voices around her became background noise, like distant echoes that couldn't penetrate the concentration she had cultivated over years of training. Despite her calm exterior, Emily could feel the tension in the air. The Marines' mockery was heavy, and some of their jabs were clearly meant to intimidate. Yet, for Emily, it only fueled her determination. Each laugh, each sarcastic remark, reminded her that people often judged too quickly, relying on appearances instead of talent. She had faced similar doubts before, from colleagues, from instructors, and even from herself, and she had learned that persistence and focus always mattered more than ridicule. Time seemed to slow as she continued her setup. The sun climbed higher, casting sharp shadows across the range. Targets in the distance shimmered slightly in the morning heat. Emily adjusted her rifle one final time, her eyes scanning the horizon, calculating the smallest shifts in wind and temperature. The Marines around her were starting to realize that she wasn't paying attention to their jokes. Some even slowed their laughter, curiosity creeping in alongside the doubt. One Marine, more confident than the rest, stepped closer and said, "Okay, hotshot. Let's see if your pink princess rifle can even hit the target." He smirked, expecting a failure that would make him the center of attention. Emily simply smiled faintly, her expression calm and unreadable. She didn't need to reply. She knew that soon the rifle would speak for itself. The moment she had prepared for, countless hours of practice, calculation, and patience, was about to arrive. The laughter, the whispers, the mockery, they all faded into the background as she focused on the target, the distance, and the perfect alignment of her shot. Around her, the Marines continued to watch with a mix of amusement and growing skepticism. Some couldn't help but whisper among themselves, wondering if maybe, just maybe, she could pull it off. Emily, entirely absorbed in her task, remained oblivious to their changing expressions. She breathed deeply, feeling the calm that comes from preparation and focus. The pink rifle, which had been the source of mockery, now seemed almost magical in her hands, not because of its color, but because of the skill she had invested in it. As she settled into position and rested her cheek against the stock, Emily realized that the real test wasn't about the rifle or the other Marines. It was about her ability to stay steady, to trust her training, and to make the shot count. The first round was coming up, and the range, once filled with laughter and doubt, was about to witness something they would never forget. Emily Sanders sat at her station, the pink rifle resting steadily on the bipod in front of her. The Marines around her were still whispering, some trying to hide their growing curiosity behind forced laughter. They had expected her to fumble, to miss the first target entirely, and yet she moved with a calm confidence that made it clear she was not intimidated by their mockery. She began the process of preparing for the shot, not hurriedly, but with the precision and patience of someone who had practiced this exact moment countless times. First, she checked her rifle's scope, making tiny adjustments to account for the sun's position and the heat rising from the range. Every number, every measurement was in her mind. Emily had spent hours studying the trajectory of bullets at long distances, learning how wind, humidity, and elevation could subtly shift the path. This was her element, and she approached it like a scientist preparing an experiment, not just a soldier ready to shoot. Next came the adjustment of her body. Emily had learned that a sniper's success depended as much on physical control as on the weapon itself. She adjusted her seating, rested her elbows firmly, and planted her feet to maintain balance. Her breathing was steady and slow, almost meditative. Every inhale and exhale was calculated, a rhythm that allowed her to remain perfectly still while her mind focused entirely on the target miles away. She was aware of the chatter behind her, the laughter, the rolling eyes, but it didn't distract her. Instead, it fueled her focus. Nearby Marines were starting to notice the care she was taking, the methodical way she approached her rifle. A few exchanged uncertain glances, realizing that perhaps they had underestimated her. One of them muttered, "She's really serious." Emily didn't react. She didn't need to. Actions, not words, were her language, and the range was about to witness her speak fluently. Emily lifted the rifle and peered through the scope, scanning the distance. The target was far smaller than anything she had practiced on during training sessions, yet she had prepared for this. She had memorized distances, learned how bullets dropped over miles, and trained herself to adjust for every minor factor that could affect the shot. It wasn't magic. It was discipline, knowledge, and relentless practice. The wind whispered across the range, slight and unpredictable. Emily knew that even the smallest gust could affect the bullet's path. She leaned into her calculations, making minute adjustments to her scope and angle. The pink rifle, once a source of mockery, now felt like a precision instrument in her hands, perfectly tuned to her skill. Every click of the scope, every movement of her fingers, was deliberate, thoughtful, and confident. Some of the Marines began to watch more closely, curiosity replacing their ridicule. They had expected her to be flashy but incompetent. Yet here she was, calm and meticulous, showing no sign of nervousness. The instructors nearby noticed as well, their eyes narrowing in interest. They had seen many recruits come and go, but there was something different about Emily. Her focus was unshakable, her method precise, and her presence commanding. Emily's thoughts were completely absorbed by the mechanics of the shot. She adjusted her trigger finger, relaxed her shoulders, and visualized the bullet's path to the target. Her mind was sharp, calculating distances, angles, and timing. She had practiced this exact scenario for years in different weather conditions at various distances and with different rifles. Now, everything converged in this single moment. Time seemed to slow for Emily as she prepared. The laughter of the Marines faded into the background. The sounds of the range dimmed, and all that existed was the target and her rifle. She exhaled slowly, letting the calm settle over her, and felt the familiar surge of concentration that always came before a shot. Nearby, the other Marines were beginning to doubt their initial assumptions. Some whispered, "She's really focused. Maybe she can do it." Others remained skeptical, but even they couldn't ignore the determination in her posture, the precision of her movements. Emily didn't acknowledge them. She didn't need to. Every second of preparation brought her closer to proving that skill, discipline, and focus mattered far more than appearances or color. Finally, Emily rested her cheek against the stock, her eyes locking on the target through the scope. She adjusted her breathing one last time, ensuring that her body and mind were perfectly aligned. Her finger hovered over the trigger, steady, unwavering, ready to release the shot. The pink rifle, once the subject of ridicule, now symbolized everything she had worked for: confidence, preparation, and mastery of her craft. As she settled in, Emily allowed herself a quiet thought. It didn't matter what the others thought. Their opinions had no power here. The only thing that mattered was the shot, the culmination of years of training, focus, and determination. The target, small and distant, waited. The Marines, who had laughed and mocked, leaned forward unconsciously, sensing that something remarkable was about to happen. And in that quiet moment of preparation, Emily felt a sense of clarity. She was ready. The shot would not just prove her ability. It would challenge the assumptions of everyone watching. She adjusted the scope one final time, centered her aim, and exhaled slowly, letting all tension flow out of her body. The first round of her challenge was about to begin, and the range was on the edge of anticipation, though none of them fully realized just how extraordinary this moment would become. The air on the range seemed to hold its breath as Emily Sanders positioned herself for her first test shot. She had been preparing for this moment for hours, maybe even years, and now it had come. Her pink rifle, once a source of ridicule, rested firmly in her hands, perfectly aligned with her target far off in the distance. The Marines who had mocked her moments before had gradually grown quiet, their curiosity mixed with a creeping sense of unease. Something about her calm confidence told them this wasn't going to be an ordinary shot. Emily took a slow, deliberate breath, letting her lungs fill completely. She felt the tension in her muscles melt away as she exhaled, focusing entirely on the target ahead. Every other sound, the whispers, the laughter, the distant cracks of rifles, faded into the background. Her mind was sharp, calculating, and completely in the present. She adjusted the scope slightly, checking the alignment one last time, then tested the trigger with a gentle squeeze, feeling the rifle respond precisely as it should. The Marines watched closely, their earlier mockery replaced by a mixture of disbelief and nervous anticipation. Some leaned forward, unconsciously holding their breath, while others exchanged quiet, shocked whispers. "Is she really going to do this?" one muttered. Another shook his head, unable to hide his astonishment. Emily's unshakable focus had already begun to change their perception, even before the rifle had fired a single shot. Emily closed her eyes for a brief second, visualizing the path the bullet would take. She imagined the wind patterns, the subtle elevation changes, and the trajectory needed to reach the distant target. This mental rehearsal, which she had done countless times during training, gave her confidence. She knew that a successful shot was not about luck. It was about preparation, calculation, and unwavering focus. With a deep, controlled breath, she opened her eyes and aligned her scope. The target, small but clear in the distance, seemed impossibly far to anyone who hadn't trained for long-range shooting. Emily's finger found the trigger naturally, her hands steady and relaxed. The Marines, who had expected failure, now watched silently, some holding their rifles loosely in disbelief. Then she fired. The crack of the rifle echoed across the range, louder than most expected. Emily's breathing remained steady, her posture unchanged. She watched the bullet fly through the air, tracing the path she had calculated so carefully. The distance was vast, yet every adjustment she had made was perfect. There was no hesitation, no wobble, just precision. Moments later, a small, precise impact hit the target dead center. The bullet struck exactly where Emily had aimed, leaving a clean, unmistakable mark. Silence fell immediately over the range. The Marines who had mocked her only moments before were frozen, their expressions a mixture of shock, awe, and embarrassment. Even the instructors, who had seen countless shooters over the years, exchanged glances, clearly impressed. The first shot had shattered all expectations. Emily allowed herself a brief, satisfied smile, but she didn't gloat. She knew the shot was just the beginning. It was proof not of her pride, but of her preparation, her focus, and her skill. She carefully reloaded, checked the scope again, and adjusted her stance. The Marines around her, still in disbelief, were beginning to whisper quietly among themselves, their earlier mockery replaced by respect and curiosity. One Marine, the loudest critic from before, shook his head slowly and muttered under his breath, "I didn't think she could do that." Another nodded, almost reluctantly, adding, "That was perfect." Emily heard none of it. She was already thinking about the next shot, the adjustments she would make, and how to maintain her focus for even longer distances. The atmosphere on the range had changed. Where there had once been laughter and doubt, now there was quiet respect, tinged with amazement. The Marines who had whispered jokes were now observing her every move, trying to understand how she had achieved such precision. Emily's pink rifle, which had been the subject of ridicule, now seemed almost magical in their eyes, not because of its color, but because of the skill and determination of the person wielding it. Emily adjusted her scope and recentered on the target, preparing for another test shot. She knew that one perfect shot could impress, but multiple shots were required to truly demonstrate mastery. The Marines watched in tense silence, realizing that she was not just lucky, she was exceptionally skilled. Their earlier assumptions, based solely on appearances, were crumbling before their eyes. As Emily prepared for the next round, a subtle shift occurred. Some Marines straightened in their positions, mimicking her focus unconsciously, while others quietly took notes of her technique. The instructors nodded approvingly, acknowledging her mastery of both mental and physical preparation. Emily's calm, methodical approach was teaching an unspoken lesson. Skill, patience, and preparation outweighed any superficial judgments. Finally, she took another slow, controlled breath and fired again. The bullet hit another distant target with the same precision, reaffirming her incredible skill. Murmurs of respect and astonishment rippled through the crowd. Emily, however, remained composed. She knew the real test was still ahead, the 6,000-meter shot that would truly challenge her abilities. For now, she had proven that appearances could be deceiving and that true skill commanded respect, even from the harshest critics. After the first test shots, the atmosphere on the range had completely changed. Where there had been laughter, doubt, and mockery, now there was a tense silence filled with curiosity and awe. The Marines who had once snickered at Emily Sanders' pink rifle were watching her closely, their eyes wide with disbelief. They had expected failure, perhaps a lucky hit, but what they had witnessed was precision, skill, and calm focus. It was no fluke. It was the product of years of training, calculation, and unshakable discipline. Emily, sitting quietly at her station, was aware of all the eyes on her, but she remained unbothered. She didn't need anyone's approval. Her only concern was the shot ahead, the longest and most challenging she had ever attempted. Today, she would attempt a 6,000-meter shot, the extreme distance that would push both her skill and her rifle to their limits. Most people, even experienced Marines, wouldn't dare attempt such a distance without specialized equipment and conditions, but Emily had trained for this moment meticulously. She adjusted her rifle once again, checking the scope with painstaking care. She calculated the effects of gravity, the wind, and even subtle temperature changes that could influence the bullet's trajectory. At such extreme distance, even a tiny miscalculation could mean missing the target by meters or worse. Emily's hands moved with deliberate precision as she adjusted the focus, the angle, and the trigger tension. The pink rifle in her hands seemed to glow in the sunlight, no longer an object of ridicule but a tool of unparalleled skill. Around her, the Marines' initial amusement had faded. Some exchanged nervous glances, whispering in disbelief. She's actually going to try it? One asked. Another shook his head, muttering, "Who even attempts a 6,000-meter shot? That's insane." Emily, of course, didn't react. She had no need to. Her preparation had already done the talking. Emily took a slow, measured breath, centering herself. She closed her eyes for a brief moment, visualizing the shot, imagining the bullet's path across the long stretch of the range. She pictured the target clearly, marking its center in her mind. She had practiced visualization countless times before, seeing the bullet's trajectory before pulling the trigger, and it always helped her maintain focus under pressure. The instructors, who had been quietly observing, exchanged impressed glances. They recognized the complexity of what she was about to attempt. Long-range shots were difficult enough, but a 6,000-meter shot was almost legendary in its difficulty. Environmental factors, minor misalignments, and even the slight motion of the rifle could alter the bullet's course. Yet Emily handled it all with calm determination. She was entirely in control, perfectly aware of every variable, and ready to face the challenge. The Marines around her leaned in slightly, some holding their breath unconsciously. Their earlier skepticism had turned into curiosity and tension. Many had seen skilled shooters before, but none with such unwavering focus and determination. They began to whisper among themselves, uncertain whether to admire her confidence or doubt its feasibility. "She can't. Can she?" one muttered. Another responded softly, "If anyone could, maybe she could." The tone had shifted. Doubt was mingling with awe. Emily's mind was a machine of calculations. She reviewed the wind speed, measured subtle changes in air pressure, and adjusted her scope for elevation. Every factor mattered, and nothing was overlooked. She knew that this shot wasn't just about hitting a target. It was about precision, timing, and patience. The bullet's journey would take seconds longer than usual, and in those moments, even the smallest error could ruin everything. But Emily was prepared. She had spent years training her body and mind to handle exactly this kind of pressure. Slowly, she positioned herself, resting her cheek against the stock, ensuring her body was perfectly aligned. Her breathing slowed, each inhale and exhale measured to calm her pulse and maintain absolute steadiness. The pink rifle, which had once drawn ridicule and jokes, now sat in her hands like a symbol of skill and determination. Every Marine watching felt a shift in their perception. The color no longer mattered. What mattered was the competence and confidence of the person wielding it. Emily glanced at the distant target one final time. She could see it faintly, a tiny point that seemed impossibly far to anyone untrained. To her, however, it was clear. Years of practice had taught her to see distances not as obstacles, but as calculations waiting to be executed. She imagined the bullet's path in her mind, adjusting for all the tiny factors she had memorized. The air around her seemed to grow still, as if the world itself had paused for her shot. The Marines watched in a tense silence. Their whispers had ceased, replaced by a sense of awe and suspense. Even the instructors leaned closer, quietly acknowledging the difficulty of what she was about to attempt. Emily, calm and focused, knew that this moment would define how the others saw her. Not just as a soldier, but as a marksman capable of achieving what few would dare to try. With her finger lightly on the trigger, Emily exhaled slowly. Her heart rate was steady, her mind clear, and her body perfectly aligned. The 6,000-meter shot was about to begin, and the entire range waited, breathless, to witness whether the young captain with the pink rifle could make the impossible seem effortless. Doubt among the Marines had been replaced by awe, but even awe could not fully predict what would happen next. Emily Sanders took one final deep breath, her finger resting lightly on the trigger of her pink rifle. Everything else, the whispers, the laughter, the distant sounds of other shooters, had disappeared from her mind. The world had narrowed to the rifle, the target, and the thousands of meters between them. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and electric, as the Marines around her watched in silent anticipation. Even the instructors, who had seen countless long-range shooters, leaned forward, recognizing the magnitude of what she was about to attempt. The target loomed impossibly far in the distance. To anyone untrained, it might have seemed like a speck on the horizon, almost impossible to hit. But Emily had trained for this moment. Every calculation, every adjustment, every hour of practice had led to this shot. She thought about the wind, the subtle shifts in air pressure, and the slight curvature of the earth over such an extreme distance. Each factor mattered. Each adjustment had to be precise. There was no room for error. She adjusted her scope one last time, aligning the crosshairs with the distant target. Her breathing slowed even further, each inhale and exhale measured and deliberate. She visualized the bullet's journey, imagining its path, how it would cut through the air, and how it would meet the target dead center. This mental rehearsal, which she had performed countless times during training, gave her confidence. Emily knew that focus was just as important as skill. One moment of distraction could ruin everything, but she was perfectly centered. The Marines around her were frozen. Their earlier mockery completely vanished. Some whispered in disbelief, others simply held their breath. "She's actually going to try it," one muttered. Another shook his head slowly, almost unwilling to believe what they were witnessing. The energy on the range had shifted completely. Where there had been laughter and doubt, now there was awe and tension. Every eye was fixed on Emily, waiting to see if she could achieve what seemed impossible. Emily's finger pressed gently against the trigger. She could feel the familiar pressure, the slight resistance that required steady control. Her body remained perfectly still, her posture aligned, her aim unwavering. She exhaled slowly, letting the last traces of tension leave her body. She was ready. The pink rifle, once a symbol of ridicule, now felt like a natural extension of herself. Precise, reliable, and deadly accurate. With complete calm, she squeezed the trigger. The crack of the rifle echoed across the range, louder than anyone expected. A sharp, clear sound that seemed to hang in the air for a moment. Emily didn't flinch. She kept her eyes on the scope, tracking the bullet's journey as it traveled thousands of meters across the landscape. Every calculation she had made came to life in that instant. The trajectory, the wind, the gravity, all aligned perfectly. Seconds felt like minutes as the bullet raced toward the distant target. The Marines around her were frozen in place, unable to move or speak, their disbelief growing with every passing second. No one had dared to attempt such a shot before, and yet here it was, moving with flawless precision. Emily's mind remained calm, focused, fully aware of the enormity of what she was doing, but free from fear or doubt. Then it happened. The bullet struck the target dead center. Perfect impact. The range, which had been filled with tension, erupted into stunned silence. No whispers, no laughter, only awe. The Marines who had mocked her moments ago couldn't believe what they had just witnessed. Even the instructors, seasoned veterans who had seen some of the most skilled shooters in the world, exchanged looks of amazement. It was a shot that seemed impossible, yet there it was, a testament to skill, precision, and focus. Emily allowed herself a small, quiet smile. She didn't celebrate. She didn't need to. The shot spoke for itself. She had proven that preparation and ability mattered far more than appearances or ridicule. The pink rifle, which had been the source of jokes, had become a symbol of mastery and determination. Every Marine on the range was now forced to acknowledge her talent, whether they liked it or not. Some of the Marines slowly approached, their earlier bravado replaced by respect. One of the loudest critics, the same who had mocked her initially, shook his head and muttered under his breath, I didn't think it was possible." Others nodded in agreement, their eyes wide with admiration. Even those who were still skeptical couldn't deny the skill they had just witnessed. Emily had not just made a shot. She had shattered assumptions. For Emily, the moment was not about proving the Marines wrong. It was about demonstrating that skill, patience, and focus were far more powerful than mockery or appearances. Every calculation she had made, every hour of practice, and every bit of discipline had culminated in that single perfect shot. It was a quiet victory, not for ego, but for mastery, perseverance, and confidence in her own abilities. The range remained quiet for a moment longer as the impact settled in the minds of everyone present. Emily, calm and composed, reloaded her rifle, prepared for the next phase of her training. But the effect of that one shot lingered. The Marines who had laughed at her pink rifle now saw it in a completely different light. It wasn't the color that mattered, it was the skill of the person behind it. In that instant, Emily had earned a respect that words could never convey. The sound of Emily's bullet striking the distant target echoed in the minds of everyone on the range long after the shot itself. For a moment, there was complete silence. The Marines, who had spent the last hour mocking her, laughing at her pink rifle, and questioning her abilities, stood frozen. Their expressions ranged from disbelief to amazement, and slowly, a wave of respect began to replace the shock that still lingered in the air. What they had just witnessed was no accident. It was precision, skill, and sheer determination, and they could not ignore it. Emily remained at her station, calm and composed. Her face was relaxed, showing neither triumph nor arrogance. She had known she could make the shot. She had trained for this moment. To her, it was just the natural result of years of preparation and focus. But she could sense the shift around her. The whispers had stopped, replaced by the quiet murmurs of admiration. Marines who had previously sneered were now studying her movements carefully, noting her posture, the way she had adjusted her scope, and the deliberate calm in her breathing. One of the instructors, a veteran sniper who had seen countless marksmen, stepped forward. His eyes, sharp and discerning, scanned Emily's rifle, her stance, and her expression. He nodded slowly, a quiet acknowledgement that spoke louder than words. "That was an incredible shot," he said, his voice calm but filled with respect. "Most shooters wouldn't even attempt that distance, and even fewer could make it with that precision." Emily acknowledged him with a slight nod, offering a small, respectful smile. She didn't need praise. Her satisfaction came from executing the shot perfectly. The Marines who had been her harshest critics began approaching, their earlier bravado replaced by humility. One of them, a tall Marine who had joked about the Princess Pink rifle only an hour ago, shook his head in disbelief. I didn't think it was possible," he admitted quietly, almost as if he were apologizing for his earlier mockery. Another Marine, who had been laughing the loudest, stepped forward and extended a hand. "You've got skill, Sanders," he said sincerely. "I guess we judged the rifle, not the shooter." Emily accepted the hand with a nod, her calm demeanor unchanged. The shift in the Marines' attitudes was palpable. They had come expecting to see a failure, perhaps a lucky hit, but instead they were witnessing mastery. For some, it was humbling. They realized that appearances could be deceiving and that underestimating someone based on style, color, or unconventional choices could be a costly mistake. Emily's pink rifle, which had been the center of ridicule, now symbolized skill, preparation, and confidence. The Marines who had mocked it now looked at it with awe, seeing it not as a toy, but as an instrument in the hands of a true marksman. Even the youngest recruits, who had been watching from the sidelines, were captivated. They whispered among themselves, inspired by what they had seen. "She didn't just make the shot," one said quietly. "She made it look easy." Another nodded. "It's not about the rifle. It's about her focus, her discipline, her patience." Emily's actions had already begun to shift the culture on the range, teaching a subtle but powerful lesson about perseverance and skill. Emily didn't dwell on the praise or the newfound respect. She carefully reloaded her rifle, checked the scope, and prepared for the next set of shots. Her focus remained entirely on the task at hand, on maintaining her technique, and on demonstrating that her success was not a one-time fluke. The Marines continued to watch, some taking notes silently, others simply observing in awe. Every move she made now carried a lesson, and the atmosphere on the range had transformed completely. One of the instructors spoke to the assembled Marines, his voice carrying authority and admiration. "Take note," he said. "This isn't about luck or appearance. This is about preparation, skill, and focus. Captain Sanders has shown what can be achieved when those qualities are combined. Let her example guide you." The Marines nodded, some silently, others audibly, recognizing that Emily's performance was a turning point. She had earned their respect, not through words or bravado, but through action, discipline, and mastery. Even those who had initially mocked her began to reflect on their behavior. They realized that underestimating someone based on superficial factors, like the color of a rifle, was a mistake. Emily's skill had not only proven them wrong, but had inspired them to reconsider their assumptions and expectations. They began to understand that mastery came from dedication, focus, and relentless practice, not from appearances or conformity. As Emily adjusted her stance and prepared for another series of shots, the atmosphere on the range was completely different. There was still tension, still anticipation, but now it was mixed with respect and admiration. The Marines who had mocked her were now quietly learning from her, observing how she aligned the rifle, how she controlled her breathing, and how she maintained calm under pressure. Every motion she made was now a lesson, and every glance at her rifle was a reminder that skill and preparation were far more important than mockery or skepticism. Emily's calm demeanor and exceptional skill had earned her more than just successful shots. They had earned her recognition, respect, and a subtle shift in the mindset of everyone present. The pink rifle, once a symbol of ridicule, now symbolized mastery and the power of perseverance. The Marines who had laughed at her were now inspired by her example, and even the instructors acknowledged that she had demonstrated something extraordinary. A perfect blend of talent, focus, and determination that left everyone speechless. The day on the range slowly began to wind down, but the impact of Emily Sanders' extraordinary performance lingered in the air like a quiet, powerful echo. The Marines who had once laughed at her pink rifle now moved with a newfound respect, their whispers replaced by admiration and awe. It was as if the range itself had been transformed. What had started as a routine training day had become a lesson in skill, focus, and determination, one that would be remembered long after the sun dipped behind the distant mountains. Emily herself remained calm and composed, methodically cleaning her rifle and preparing it for storage. She had accomplished what she came to do, but her satisfaction was quiet, almost private. She didn't need applause or recognition to feel proud. Her pride came from knowing that she had executed each shot with precision, that she had trusted her training, and that she had demonstrated what preparation and focus could achieve. The pink rifle, which had once been the source of ridicule, now sat polished and ready, a silent symbol of perseverance and mastery. The Marines lingered around her, their earlier skepticism replaced by genuine curiosity. Some asked questions about her technique, eager to understand how she had managed such incredible accuracy at impossible distances. Others simply watched, hoping to learn something from the quiet confidence she exuded. Emily answered patiently, explaining small adjustments, techniques for controlling breathing, and ways to calculate distance and environmental factors. She spoke without arrogance, focusing on the importance of discipline and preparation rather than her own achievements. A few of the younger recruits approached, their eyes wide with admiration. "Captain Sanders," one said, "I never imagined someone could make a shot like that. How did you stay so calm?" Emily smiled softly, crouching slightly to meet their gaze. "Focus on what you can control," she said gently. "Ignore the noise, trust your training, and stay patient. The rest will follow." The recruits nodded, absorbing every word, realizing that they had just witnessed a masterclass in both skill and mindset. Even the instructors, hardened veterans who had seen countless shooters, gathered around. They discussed the shot with a mixture of awe and respect. "Few could manage that distance," one said, shaking his head, "and even fewer with such poise." Another added, "It wasn't just the shot. It was her preparation, her discipline, and her focus. That's what made it possible." Emily listened quietly, acknowledging their praise with small nods, but she didn't dwell on it. Her work was not about recognition, it was about mastery and the silent impact it left on those around her. The atmosphere on the range had shifted entirely. What had begun as a scene of mockery and doubt had transformed into one of respect and inspiration. The Marines who had laughed at her now found themselves reflecting on their own assumptions and biases. They realized that judging someone based on appearances, whether it was the color of a rifle, gender, or unconventional choices, was a mistake. Emily's performance had demonstrated that skill, focus, and preparation mattered far more than superficial judgments. As the sun began to lower, casting long golden shadows across the range, Emily packed her equipment with careful precision. Every movement, every adjustment was deliberate, showing the same discipline she had demonstrated in her shots. The Marines watched quietly, some inspired, some humbled, but all changed in some small way. The lesson was clear. Excellence comes from dedication and focus, not from conforming to expectations or appearances. Emily took one last look at her pink rifle, a small smile crossing her face. The rifle had been more than just a tool. It had been a statement, a reminder of her individuality, and a testament to the countless hours of preparation she had invested. It symbolized her refusal to let mockery or doubt define her, and it had become a beacon of inspiration for everyone who had witnessed her skill. The irony was not lost on the Marines. What had been a source of ridicule had become a symbol of mastery and respect. As she walked away from the shooting line, Emily noticed the subtle changes in those around her. Marines were quietly discussing techniques, sharing observations, and asking questions. The instructors exchanged nods, clearly impressed by not only her skill but her ability to inspire others through action. Even those who had doubted her most now carried a quiet respect that couldn't be undone. Emily realized that the impact of her performance extended far beyond the shots themselves. She had left a mark on the mindset of everyone present. In the weeks that followed, Emily's story spread across the base. Her remarkable performance became an example, a source of inspiration for other Marines, both new recruits and seasoned veterans alike. They spoke of her precision, her discipline, and her calm under pressure. The pink rifle, once a target of jokes, became a symbol of perseverance and excellence. Her example encouraged others to embrace individuality, trust their training, and pursue mastery without fear of judgment. For Emily, the lesson was simple but profound. True success is measured not by the opinions of others, but by the dedication, focus, and skill one brings to every challenge. She had faced mockery, doubt, and skepticism, yet she had remained steadfast, and in doing so, she had inspired everyone who witnessed her. The pink rifle, the 6,000-meter shot, and the silence that followed would be remembered long after the echoes faded. By the end of the day, Emily had not only proven her skill, but had also left a legacy. She had taught an unspoken but powerful lesson, that excellence, preparation, and unwavering focus can overcome doubt, ridicule, and low expectations. Her story would inspire others to pursue mastery, to trust themselves, and to understand that appearances are never as important as the dedication and skill behind them. In that quiet, unassuming way, Emily Sanders became more than a marksman. She became a symbol of perseverance, inspiration, and the power of believing in oneself.